All right. This week we begin with Vayikra, chapter 7, verse 25. That's known as Leviticus in the world, I shall say. Literally in English, it would say, "For all eat that from the livestock, and he bring from her burnt offering to Yahweh, and shall be cut off her the soul that eat from people's her." Okay, you remember the her here being the soul, right? The soul is spoken of in the feminine. Some things like the names of cities and stuff like that are in feminine no matter what the sentence is or who's being spoken to, makes no difference. And that's the same thing here. So it's not talking about only women having a soul. Oh, Donna says, although we all know that's true. All right, so we begin with the words ki kol ochel. So it's if everything, if all eats, in this case, it's going to be anyone. If anyone eat, because ochel is to eat, to devour, to gobble it down, so it's like spoken of eating food. They're consuming a land of a army consuming its enemy and stuff like that. But we're talking about eating food here. And so then it says chelev. So if you eat, well, I shouldn't have said food, I suppose. If you eat fat. Remember last week we ended with don't eat fat. You cannot eat fat under any circumstances. And even though the scribes who wanted to eat fat decided that, well, they didn't mention that law again later on, so that means that law went away. OMG. Wow. Anywho, it's teaching like that makes me think, it shouldn't be surprising that the Christians think that they don't have to live by God's law. The Jews are given a bad example here. All right, so it's the fat, then it says min ha behema. So that's from the beasts, and that's all of them. That's when you say behema, you can be talking about oxen, cattle, sheep. Technically, you could be talking about birds. It's just the word that we would say beasts. So they're animals, and it's not animals that are wild as opposed to domesticated, one or the other. No, it's all of them. It's just animals in general. And we used to say beasts, now we say animals. That's all it's saying. So if you can't eat any of the fat from any of that. This is asher yakariv, or yakriv, I think is more modern, which is he bring. It's to approach, to come near. It's the word that we've had over and over again when we start talking about making an offering. Because when you make an offering, it's not of you taking this sheep. Let's use a sheep. It's not of you bringing that sheep near, or into the temple. It's not because they didn't even have a temple when this stuff started. Think about the first official sacrifice that was ordered by God would be Abraham and his, Abraham and Yitzhak, right? Yitzhak would have been but of course God knew before that ever started that he wasn't going to do it, right? Is that because he changed his mind about Yitzhak? No, it's because it was a, what do you call that when it's a visual lesson? It was, there's a word for that. Anyway, the pagan idol worshippers from around that area and the known world of the time had a habit of sacrificing their firstborn child and to Moloch mostly. Not just Moloch, but mostly the big thing at the time. You took your oldest child and the statue of Moloch, the hands would be over the fire. It would be the actual altar portion of it where the fire was below it, and they would throw their children on that. And they beat the drums really, really loud at the time to beat out, to drown out the sound of the children screaming. It was horrible. But if you didn't do that, if you didn't sacrifice your first child and you had a big drought that next year, guess what was going to happen to you and the rest of your children and your wife and probably your cousins, your aunts, your uncles, your moms, and your dads? I mean, everybody was going to be put to death, and it was going to be probably a very cruel, slow death. So people did that to protect the rest of their family. Some people did it, I'm sure, because they were excited about giving an offering to Moloch, although I can't imagine it. There probably were some. I mean, look how excited so much of the people in the world today are about killing off their kids in the abortion clinics, and that's exactly what they're doing. So it must have been much like that. You had the group of people who were horrified by people killing off their children, and then you had the other group of people that were more like it's my body, it's my right, even though it isn't your body. It's not. No woman can say that and be telling the truth. That's not your body. That's the body of a child, and it doesn't make any difference what stage of development that is. If it's the day after, or it's 9 months or 10 months after, it makes no difference. That's not your body. So anyway, that's a stupid argument. But you can see it's been going on since the beginning of time, right? I mean, from the very beginning. And what did God have to say about that? Well, he says, okay, Abraham, everybody knows who you are. Everybody's going to know about this. This is going to be one of the most famous stories ever told. Here's what you do. You take your child and you go up to Mount Moriah and you sacrifice that boy like everybody else does. Abraham had to have known that it wasn't going to happen because it's against God's law. It's against the very things that God told him about. Through him, his seed were going to spread out across the whole world and all that kind of stuff. God would be a liar if that actually happened, right? So he had to have known that this wasn't going to take place. But there'd still be that fear because God's not one for giving a lot of details if you think about it. Here's the law, here's how you enact the law, and that's all you get. You don't even, most of the time, you're not even told why. And we just have to make guesses about the why, which I gave up on some time ago. Gave it up for Lent one year. I'm done with that. God says that's the way he wants it. That's good enough for me. Anyway, so it was kind of the same thing, right? You got this object lesson. That's what it's called. So he goes up and he says, listen here. You're going to go up here and you're going to kill off your son. So he gets up there and it says the angel of God, which is a bad translation, the messenger of God. So it could have been a prophet that just happened to be walking by at that time, or maybe God sent so that he'd be happening by at that moment. Or it could have been someone from heaven. I mean, there's no way for us to know that. And anyone who tells you that we know the difference don't know what they're talking about, because you don't know. I'm a messenger of God, but I'm no angel. Anywho, so as you know how that turned out. Oh, there's a goat tangled in the bushes over there. Go grab him. Well, why would God do that? Because did he change his mind? Was he kind of schizophrenic there? No. The point was that with this God, the one that actually created everything, not the fake one that's created by human beings, because human beings tend to want to just murderize anytime they can get away with it, apparently. But the real God who created everything wanted everyone to know that there was never, ever going to be a time, ever, because God doesn't change, when it was okay to sacrifice your child. So it was an object lesson, right? So he brought his child near to the moment of actually slaughtering that child. And we bring near, not our children, we bring near, in this story I'm telling, a sheep. So it's not of the bringing it near to the building or to the tent or to someone's house or to some pit where you're going to drop him in and cook him. No, it's not about that. It's the bringing that animal to that place of that sacrifice. That's what we're talking about. Probably a long way to go for something like that, but hey, take it up with the boss. Anyway, then Edah, which literally means from her, Isheh. Well, Isheh, that sounds like woman, doesn't it? Looks like it's spelled like that too. That means burnt offering. It's a sacrifice so called from the fire by hands all kinds of sacrifices, and is even once in the Bible used of sacrifice. So it's just a common word for burnt offering or for sacrifice, because an offering and a sacrifice and all of that's the same thing. Even the word for slaughter is the same thing. In fact, the word for cut thing. So there's a few words there, and they all essentially mean exactly the same thing. You know, Hebrew really likes to do that. Few words, lots of meaning, instead of lots of words and little meaning. Anyway, so you bringing it near to that sacrifice, and this is La Yahweh, because when you make a sacrifice, you are not making a sacrifice to Holy Mary, the Mother of God. Nope, that ain't happening. You're not making a sacrifice to Jesus, the bouncing baby boy of Mary and God. Nope, that ain't happening. When you make a sacrifice, you're not making that sacrifice to some false idol that you're worshiping in place of God, because you've been told that person stands in how do they put that, in the gap for you. That's the way. How do they used to say that? It's like they're your lawyer and they're what is the word? Because you pray to Mary, and Mary is supposed to pray to Jesus, and Jesus is supposed to pray to God. What? Interceding. That's the word. Sorry, I have a little trouble with some of these Christian words. Well, no. Interceding is what I was really. Advocate was what I was talking about, because that's what the intercessor does, right? That's your advocate. So anyway, either word would have worked, but I was looking for interceding. So anyway, uh, so you're bringing this sacrifice. It's for Yahweh. Now you say that, I say that, the Bible says that, but God doesn't eat. It's not like the story of Daniel and, was it Moloch? No, was it Bel and the Dragon? I think was the name of the story, right? Where it's in the Apocrypha or Pseudepigrapha, I don't remember which. Used to be in the back of the King James Bible, by the way. Do you know when the King James Bible first, King James wrote a law and said that anyone caught publishing that version of the Bible, that English translation of the Bible, that at the time didn't bear his name. So if you have someone trying to sell you a 1611 KJV and it says King James on it anywhere, you are being duped. Anyway, he made this law that said that if anyone got caught publishing that book without the pseudepigrapha, they would get a 1-year sentence in jail. Of course, it only took a few years later before they lifted that law, but that's the way he felt about it at the time. But the Puritans saw it as a Catholic thing, which is odd since it was a Jewish thing, but they saw it as Catholic, and since they were splitting off from the Catholics, they wanted to get rid of it, which they ultimately did. But in that writing, there's a story, and I believe it's the one that's Bel and the Dragon. I'm pretty sure it is. But what they did was the prophets of, it's Baal, but they say Baal, right? They were taking all these food donations, and people would come back the next morning and the food would be gone, and they said that their God was eating this food. And so Daniel comes along and decides to prove that they're not telling the truth. By the way, this is folklore. It's not a true story. It was never intended to be a true story. And I don't think there's anyone who ever believed it was a true story. It's a folklore. It's just a story that you told your kids to teach them moral lessons and things like that. But anyway, Daniel, unbeknownst to the prophets of Baal, goes out and puts something on the floor, a dust of some sort. And so when they come back the next morning to see if Baal ate the sacrifice, well, the sacrifice is gone. But what they didn't know, because they did this in the dark, was that they had left footprints everywhere. And it revealed that there was a secret door at the base of the statue of Baal where they were coming and going. They'd come out, get the stuff, and go back behind that door. But they left the footprints when they took it out. So our God doesn't do that. He doesn't, for one, he doesn't get false prophets to pretend like he's eating, but our God doesn't eat food, right? So when it says that you're giving it to Yahweh, who's actually receiving the benefit? You are, and the priest who's officiating over that. We're the ones that benefit from the food itself. How does God benefit from this? Do you guys remember what we've learned? What we have learned up to this point is that when we obey God and we bring these sacrifices and we do them properly, there's not a lot to doing them properly. You just got to make sure that your animal is without blemish, right? You make sure of that. You make sure it's the right animal. You can't offer a female when God has explicitly said it has to be a male, or vice versa. You can't offer a duck when God says it's a pigeon, right? So there's not a lot of rules there, but you have to offer the correct animal. It has to be uh, of good quality, and why wouldn't you? You're going to be eating of this animal. I mean, just saying that don't make any sense. Just being stingy or something. So you give God your best, and you benefit from that right away. And when we do that, the Bible says that that is a sweet smelling savor to God. That is something, our obedience is so much more important than our sacrifice. Does that ring a bell? Just saying, just throwing some things out there to see if I can mess with your heads a little bit. That's called remez. I hinted back to something. Hopefully you guys know what I'm talking about. All right, so we're bringing this to Yahweh, it says, and then it says, ve nichreta, and shall be cut off her. And it's going to say nefesh, the soul, her, remember that's the feminine, but it's just because we're talking about the soul. It's not that your soul is a girl and you're a man or whatever. It has nothing to do with any of those things. It's just a rule of grammar. When you're speaking about the soul, it's going to be in the feminine gender, but it has nothing to do with gender as the way we would think of it, right? So anyway, that soul is going to be cut off. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that if you've done something incorrect here, I forgot which thing we're talking about is incorrect at this point. It doesn't matter. It works the same with all of them. Whether it's the wrong animal, it's the wrong time, or in this case, probably eaten at the wrong time. Whatever it is that we've done that is incorrect, what this verse is telling us that until we make the sin sacrifice and we do it correct, we have to separate ourselves from the rest of the population. Not that the population separates itself from us, but that we separate ourselves from them. So Judaism, the Bible religion, the religion of the Bible, which I would call Judaism, not Christianity, in this religion, God is telling us and teaching us and making us live in a way such that we are responsible for our own actions. We don't run around blaming somebody else because we brought an inferior animal or because we did some kind of trickery to hide the blemishes on the animal and got caught. That we learn from God's law from day one on that we are responsible for our own walk with God. It is not up to the rabbi to make sure that you live your life right. It is not up to the rabbi or to his followers to make sure that everyone around them lives their life right. Then I'll give you an example. I remember a Christian lady. We were at her house one time, and everybody got to talking about um, I want to say it lifestyle orientation. Let me put it that way. Y'all know what I'm talking about? This woman felt, and it was a group we'd gotten together. We were all sitting around talking about Bible and all that. And this woman felt that it was her obligation, according to the Bible, that to make sure that everybody knew that having a certain lifestyle orientation was a horrible thing as far as God was concerned, and that person was going to hell, and that person needed to get on the right road and live their life right and repent and go to the acceptable lifestyle. Right? It felt like that was her duty and obligation in life to do that. That is not what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches that we are responsible for our own life. We're responsible for our own salvation and no one else's. We are not responsible for somebody else's. And that comes in part with Christians because from the moment they say, come into my heart, Jesus, and I don't know the prayer. Okay. I'm sorry I don't know it. But the 8-second prayer, somebody called it that once and it stuck in my head, the 8-second prayer. I don't remember who said that. I think it was that guy in Dallas. He's a black man, he's a tall, big, muscled up looking guy. Do you remember who I'm talking about? He had that giant church in outside Dallas. T.D. Jakes. I think he's the one who said, I'm sorry if I've got that wrong, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but I think he was the one who, at least who I heard say that. I don't know if that was his something he coined, but I think it was. But he talked about the 8-second prayer. Well, I don't know what the 8-second prayer is. That came a long time after, my experience with the whole Christian thing. But so they say this 8-second prayer, and from the moment they've done that, it is now their duty and their obligation to share their testimony with everybody that they meet. You're standing in line at the grocery store, and you either forget to say something or you're terrified to talk to strangers, which was one of my issues all my life. Isn't that funny? I chose a career where I'm in front of people all the time. And I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about the music industry when I was doing all that. And yet I was terrified of crowds. The smaller the crowd, the more terrifying it was. I wasn't so much terrified when there was 60, 70, 80,000 people out there. That didn't bother me because it was just a sea of black. You didn't see anything, but the lights seemed to be off because you're standing where the lights are facing you, right? So when you look out in the audience, all you see is just pitch black. It's like it's nighttime and all the lights are off, but you could sure feel the energy. it rushes through your body like nothing you've ever experienced when the crowds are that big. And that didn't bother me. But the smaller the crowd, when you're talking 2 or 3 people, I was terrified. And I had to walk out because I was saddled with this as a child. I'd go to a store and then I'd walk out feeling guilty because I didn't say something, and now they were going to go to hell for all of eternity because I was too chicken to say something. That's a terrible way to have to live. And it's totally against the grain if you think about it. Even the New Testament says not to send out a novice. And that's exactly what the whole religion does. So that's an oddity to me. It's very wrong thinking. But this is about personal responsibility. It's not about everybody else in Judaism or Christianity for that matter. It's not about them telling you how to live right. It's not about their responsibility to make sure that you're doing it right. No, it has always been about you and God working this thing out together, because you have to take responsibility for your own life. It is not up to your government to take responsibility for you. Shame on you if you think that that's a religious mandate. Oh my goodness. Apparently a lot of churches are that way, and I know that some even some Jewish places are that way. It's terrible, and shame on you, you lazy thing. Get off your backside and work your salvation out. God's waiting. Anyway, this is about us taking responsibility for our own life, for our own religion, for our own walk with God. So when we know that we have sinned, it is up to us to cut ourselves off from the people until we have made that right. And it's not really hard to do, right? Nothing about God's law is hard. Nothing. Now, what I to turn it into, whether Jewish or non-Jewish, what's funny is how much you see the Christians think they know about Judaism, which is zero, but they think they know everything there is to know, and they can talk intelligently about it. Oy, oy, oy. But it's just as bad on the Jewish side. They think they know all about Christianity, and they don't know a thing about it. There's a guy out there. I don't know his name. He says he's a rabbi. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I don't really know. It doesn't seem very rabbi-esque, if you ask me, but he's made a complete career out of griping and moaning and complaining about the way Christians read the New Testament. Yet in Judaism, you're not supposed to read the New Testament. And a rabbi of all people ought not be doing that, right? But he's going around reading an English translation of the New Testament and arguing and telling people how awful they are and how wrong they are because he's hateful about it. And he doesn't even know what he's talking about. Yeah. But you guys get where I'm going with this. This isn't about that rabbi telling you Christians how to live. And it's not about the Christians telling the Jews how to live. It's not about the Christians telling the alternate lifestyle people how to live. No, this is all about you doing what you know is right, and you cutting yourself off from the people of God, because that's what God's asked you to do until you've made things right. Are you with me? So cutting yourself off from the people, what does that mean? Does that mean you have to go stay in a motel while your wife and kids stay at home? Oh my God. You'd be surprised how many Jews do that. You cut yourself off from your immediate family. You cut yourself off from the congregation that you're a part of, right? That's what you're supposed to do. You don't go run off and leave your wife and kids to manage for themselves or any of that sort of thing. That's nonsensical. So anyway, let's not do that. But it is a time for us not to be having conversations with these people. That should stop. And that's why when somebody gets pushy and doesn't get that you're trying to cut yourself off and they're trying to have a conversation, they're trying to get you to come over to their house for dinner, you finally have to say one word. That is one word, right? Unclean. Never know. Un and clean could be two words. I'm just saying. I mean, just read the interweb these days. We were watching Jay Leno with his headlines. Boy, that stuff's hysterical. You got to see that. I'm trying to remember where my mouse is. It's over here. All right, so you got to cut yourself off. Ha nefesh, it says that soul, right? What's it mean by that? Just your soul and your body's there, but your soul is no. It's and I've said this before. It's like how many souls were on the ship, how many souls were on the aircraft or are on the aircraft. They still say it that way to this day. It's how many people. We would probably say people, but they used to say souls because that includes man, woman, and child. And you don't count the ducks, the chickens, or the dogs. I'm just saying. Okay. Then it says ha telet, that eat. So the soul that eats something, stuff on that word, me'ameha. So the person who eats, remember it's the fat. The person who eats, and then it says from people's her, or from among their people, right? This is a Jewish religion, so we're talking about the Jews. Okay, so our translation. For everyone who eats from the livestock which he brought as a burnt offering to Yahweh, that soul is cut off, those that eat from among her people. Let's say it that way. I left part of that out. All right, I have a note here. It says this verse actually helps the argument of Kyle and Deluge from verse 23, that there is a difference between sacrifices brought to Yahweh and the slaughtering of an animal at home, in that it stresses that this rule is related to sacrifices made to Yahweh. You guys remember that? Because there was the argument about, well, you can eat the fat if you eat at home and you're making your sacrifice at home. You just can't eat the fat somewhere else, except for the fact that it said twice already, just today, that you can't have that fat. And it said it at least twice last week at the end of that message, right? So once again, the person who eats from the pieces offerings that are unclean must separate himself or herself, that soul, from the people until he or she can make a sin sacrifice. This would have been an expensive mistake, like I said last time. I mean, real expensive. But so did the law go away? No, no. God does not change. If it was a law at the beginning, it's a law at the end. Wait a minute, what about Pesach? Okay, you got me. No, I'm just kidding. there were commandments given for the night of Pesach that ended with that Pesach, right? Because the law had not been given. When you get to Sinai, that's where the law is given. When God speaks a law at Sinai, that's forever. The thing at the first Pesach, at the leaving of Mitzrayim, of Egypt, that's different because that's the very first time, and they don't have the law at that point. Now, do some people know the law before the law is given? I think the Bible's pretty clear on that. Yes, they did. But these are people who had spent much time with God. Abraham, uh, Moshe, who else? There's Samuel would have. There was a bunch of them who, before the time of the giving of the law, somehow seemed to know the law. But they spent a lifetime with God before that was ever said about them. Did they know it to the exactness of the events at Sinai? Probably not. But Maybe so. You can't say either way. But anywho, let's move on. I hope I took up half the time just doing that one. Ooh. All right, 26. And all blood not shall eat they in all dwellings, or to birds and to livestock. Wow. Going to say it again. God is trying to make sure that we understand that we're not supposed to have blood in our diet, right? We're not supposed to have this blood, and yet everywhere you turn, somebody's making up a new reason as to why we can have blood. So it starts off the whole dam. So in all blood, dam is blood. That's where you get Adam, mankind. He's not called Adam because his skin is red and ruddy, like what you read in Jacinius and most of that stuff from the 1800s. No, no, no. That's some dummy who was raised where it's mostly white people, probably never knew a Jew in his lifetime, saying something that stupid. He's called Dom because his life is in the blood that flows through his veins. It doesn't really have anything to do with color. If it's associated with color, it will be associated with red, but I don't think that it should be associated with red. I think that was a Western Hellenized version of what that word means. Dam is the word for blood. And then we say Adam, and I know everybody thinks that's a guy's name, but it's not a guy's name. It's the word we would say in English, mankind. And we wouldn't say, "Hey, mankind, how you doing? Shake my hand there, mankind." Not a man's name. It was, go back and read Genesis now, the first couple of chapters, without thinking that that's a single man. And read it as mankind and see if you don't get a little better understanding of what's going on. Anyway, so it's about the blood. And this is lo tochlu, shall not eat it. Whoopsie. This is bechol moshebotechem, in any of your dwellings. You can't eat it in your house. You can't eat it in your shed. You can't eat it. You can't eat it in your place of employment. You can't eat it over at your buddy's house. You can't have it anywhere. Laof. So you can't have the blood that comes from a bird. And then la behema. You can't have it from among the livestock. You can't have it. You're starting to get a feeling that God may be trying to tell us something here. So our translation of 26, and they shall not eat any of the blood in any of your dwellings of birds or of livestock. Ruh-roh, Shaggy. There goes the argument of Kyle and Deluch from verse 23. Or does it? The law of these sacrifices do not state that the meat cannot be taken home, right? Assuming a person lived close to the temple, because that's where the sacrifice would take place. You're going to drag the blood home? I mean, it would be coagulated by the time. Anyway. However, the blood was burned, spattered, and poured out. How would they be able to take it home to eat it? In the end, the law includes home slaughter. You cannot eat the blood. You can't drink it. You can't lick your fingers. You can't have it. Hopefully, those last 4 verses have made us understand that God doesn't want us participating in blood. All right, verse 27. Also that shall eat all blood and shall be cut off her, the soul, the she, which means, of course, these, from people's her. How many times are you going to say it, God? God's probably going to keep repeating it until somebody gets it. I'm just saying that's kind of the point. So we start off, kol nefesh. Every soul, every one of us, all of the humans. Asher tochal, every one of the souls that eat. Oh my gosh, we're going to starve to death. We got to eat. Kol dam. Everyone who eats the blood. Everyone who eats the blood. Venich reta. They shall be cut off. Which means they will cut themselves off. We're not going to cut them off. I mean, if it gets to the point where we have to cut them off, their sin is pretty grievous, right? Because there is law for that. If somebody's going to remain living in sin, there's about a guy who is having an affair with his stepmom, which, ew. But anyway, the guy is doing this, and he's obviously a big donor to the organization because they didn't kick him out. Just throwing that in there. It's speculatory on my part, I know. But why else would you have somebody in your organization, in your congregation, knowing that he is doing this outwardly? He's showing up to synagogue with her arm wrapped around his. I mean, wow. Nobody's hiding this from anybody. And poor dad having to, sit on the back row and try not to see it? And maybe on the front row, that might help. I don't know. I can't imagine this, but they didn't stop that. And the rabbi, when he found out about it, said, "What is wrong with you people? Kick him out. We don't condone that kind of thing." That's pretty serious when you get to the point where you're kicking somebody out of your synagogue. Of course, in the Hebrew world, no, they didn't just kick someone out and say, "Don't ever come back." That's not the way it worked. When they kicked you out, what they did generally was, you're committing some pretty bad sin, and we want to show the whole congregation that we don't stand with you on this. So we want you to straighten up your act, and if you do, and you want to come back in a month, then come on back. If you don't, there's really no point in you coming back. Of course, nowadays, if you said that to somebody, they'd be, well. In their day, you wouldn't have been allowed in anybody else's synagogue. You'd have to go back and make it right with your own. Just saying. I like those days. They would have been nice. Long gone by the time I came around. Our next word is ve'nichreta. Does that sound familiar? And shall be cut off. So that person who has committed this particular sin of eating blood is to cut themselves off. I mean, think about how important this is. Think about how many times God has now repeated himself. He is trying to make absolutely sure that we know that when we do something like this, when we step across that line, we have to make it right. And if we're not willing to stop the activity, we have to at least not hang out with God's children. Because the last thing God needs is the whole congregation doing the same thing. Because that's generally the way it works. Your witness doesn't change them. Their actions change you. That's the more likely. So it said cut off ha-nefesh, cut off that soul. All right, what have we got next? This is ha-he, which is literally the she. So in English, we say these, These, these. This is ameha, that's from people's her. So you cut yourself off From who? These people, your people. You cut yourself off from the other people who are a part of your congregation, who are part of what you do. You cut yourself off from the other Jews. All right. Our translation then is real simple and short. Every soul that eats the blood shall be cut off. These souls from among its people. I don't know. That translation is right. It's absolutely right. But I'm not sure it gets the point across. Every soul that eats the blood shall cut itself off from the other souls from among his people. Can I say it that way? Because that makes more sense, right? I'm trying to get you to understand in English, and that's a pretty good way to do that, I think. So again, the person who eats from the peace offerings that are unclean must separate themselves from the people of their congregation, their people, the Jews here, until they can make a sin sacrifice. It's a very expensive mistake, to say the least. So what are we? Okay, we've got a little bit of time. Now, Kyle and Deluge of verses 28 through 36 said that Yahweh's share of, they said that verses 28 through 36 explain Yahweh's or point out Yahweh's share of the pieces offering. Because you realize some of it goes to the person who brings the offering, goes to the officiating priest, and some of it goes to Yahweh. It's for Yahweh. He's not going to eat any of it, right? So I think what they're saying is the parts that are burned up on the altar and the part of the blood that's thrown out on the ground and that sort of thing, that they're trying to tell you, well, that's the part that's for Yahweh. No, your obedience is the part that's for Yahweh. The rest of it just needs to be burned off because it's not for anybody. Anyway, verse 28 literally says, and he spoke Yahweh to Moshe to say, all right, so what happens? What just happened? You guys know. We have a change of topic. That's what's happening. So it says, and Yahweh spoke to Moshe saying, right? In English, it's the way we say it. Do I? Okay, I think I have enough time. Speak to children Yisrael to say that make come, that bring, slaying pieces offerings his to Yahweh he go, offering he to Yahweh from slaying pieces offerings his. Daber is in the woods. No, speak. But this is the word for setting in a row, ranging in order, words that lead, that guide. Say this in a way that they can understand it. Say it in a way that they can follow it, right? These are, it's important that you try your best to make this understandable. This is El, which is a sound-alike word, right? Because El is how you say God, right? And it's even spelled the same, by the way. It's not always God. Sometimes it just means to, T-O. I said to you, right? B'nai. So say to the children. And this is the word children. It's not say to the sons, which you see in a lot of translations of the text into English. Say to the sons of Israel, right? No. Say it to the children. The children. They are descendants, grandson. It is a name of age for a boy, for youth. So they would use this speaking of teenagers, if you will, preteens. But anyway, it's both genders, it's boys and girls. So we say children. Sorry, I have to look back every once in a while and get my finger back on that button. It's a little bitty one. Yisrael. Don't say it to the Baptists. Don't say it to the Pentecostals. It isn't for them. Don't say it. Oh, see there, we don't have to live by the law. Oh, you got me. What can I do? Lemor. All right. Now, a while ago, the bear was in the woods, right? Damer. Now it's lemor. You hear it's a different word. This is to say the primary signification is to bear forth, hence to bring light, or put a different way, to shed light on the subject. Enlighten these people with these very carefully placed words. Does that help? I hope so. Then it says ha-makariv or ha-mak-riv, I believe would be more modern. I don't really know. I don't do much modern. But anyway, that means that may come. So we would say bring, to approach, to come near. And so the person who's bringing this offering, right? Zevach, this sacrifice, this slaying, this animal that will be killed. Shelamaiv. So it's pieces, it's piece in plural. The word P-E-A-C-E in plural. Hit the button that says computer on the box there. Are you seeing the computer? Okay, making a mess over here. Can you see my mouse? Yeah, here we go. I want you to notice here that I have the word P-E-A-C-E, and then I had this little S, right? Because pieces sounds like shards of something, like you've broken a glass into pieces. That's not the word. We're not talking about that sort of thing. We're talking about shalom, and this is his, peace is his, and we would say his peace backwards. You realize we're almost the only people. The other thing. I'm over here. Sorry. So anyway, the next word is La Yahweh, and that is the proper name of God. They say it means he was, he is to come. And they try to break that up into three different words, all being slammed together. It's sort of, kind of, but not really. What's funny is they make three words out of it, and two of them are actually the same word. Anyway, it's a word that is used to show that God is eternal. He was here in the eternity before eternity existed, and he'll be here in the eternities that happen after it doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, you can't wrap your head around it. It's not worth trying. Then we have the word Yabil. It's from the word bo, to come, to enter. But remember, to come is to go, and to go is to come. To leave is to arrive. To, what's some other things I can say? Can you help me out with that line of thinking there? Anyway, in Hebrew, the word bo is both to come and to arrive, to go, to come. They're the same thing, because if you go somewhere, you arrive somewhere. You come to that place in which you went, right? So if you went, you go. If you went, you come. Because the same word means the same thing, because you can't do the one, you cannot go and not arrive. You may not arrive where you intended to go, but you arrive somewhere. It's kind of like the past, present, future thing. Right now, I am living in the present. Oop, that's now the past. Anywho, it was funny in my head. Sorry. I'll have to keep my day job or something. Then it says et carbano. That's korban, I think is how most people say it. It's oblation. It's making an offering, making a sacrifice. It's the word for the giving part, because it's used just as much for giving money as it is for sacrificing an animal. So it's just the generic word for offering. We could say offering. And then it says La Yahweh. So it's an offering to Yahweh, even though he's really receiving no benefit beyond the fact that we are obeying our God, and he finds that to be have you ever heard somebody, they've got a newborn baby? I've heard women say this many times in my life. They have a newborn baby, they say, "Ooh, I just want to eat this baby up," and of course you realize that they don't literally mean they want to pull out a fork and a knife and eat that baby, right? It's that saying that makes no sense, yet we all kind of understand it. That's what a sweet smelling savor is. You just can't get enough. That's what happens when we obey God's law. In particular, when we make these sacrifices and give something to God. All right, mi zevach. That's literally means from sacrifice or from slaying or from the killing. Speaking of the animal itself. She lamaiv, the pieces offering again. So our translation, speak to the children of Yisrael, saying, he who brings his slayings of pieces offerings to Yahweh shall bring his offerings to Yahweh from the slayings of his pieces offerings. That don't make a lick of sense, does it? Speak to the children of Yisrael, saying, he who brings his slayings of pieces offerings to Yahweh shall bring his offerings to Yahweh from the slayings of his pieces offerings. You're going to bring what God told you to bring, and you're going to offer it the way God told you to offer it, and you're going to do it for the reason God gave you. That's how you bring the slayings of the peace offerings to Yahweh, by bringing his offerings to Yahweh from the peace offerings. Did that make any sense? I hope it did, because that's what that means. Do it the way you were told to do it, please. Don't put your own spin on it. Don't try to make it your own. Don't try to update it. Don't try to say, "Oh, God's old fogey stogie. Let's do it. Let's do it a more progressive way." Progressivism does not belong in God's world. Change is all around us every day in every way. It's God's law and our following of that law that never changes. Do it God's way. And that's a great place to stop today. Shalom and shalom, y'all.